Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, how are you? My name is Gina, and on this channel we talk about plants, and in this video we're going to be talking about plants. Specifically, this video is entirely about African violets. So recently I put out a request to you guys to give me suggestions for videos, and I had an overwhelmingly high number of people requesting African violet care video. So that's what we're going to do here today in this video. Now let me just point out quickly that I do not consider myself an expert on African violets. I am a hobbyist. I am a lover of African violets. I am constantly learning new things about these plants. I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on their care, which is why I feel comfortable enough doing this video for you guys. Like I feel like I would not call myself an expert by any means, but I do feel like I have enough knowledge and enough to share with you to provide quality information about African violets. So yeah, here we are. You guys know I love the African violets. Okay, so I just want to give you a little background on these guys, just a little history lesson for you guys about these plants. So now the African violet, it's the St. Paulia oeantha. I think like in Western society we refer to them as African violets, but like most places around the world they're known as St. Paulias. It's just easier, I think. It's just easier to say African violet, and in my case, sometimes I just refer to them as AVs, just a little short abbreviation. That's a me thing. But anyway, so now they were discovered in the wooded mountains of the Usambra the wooded areas of the Usambra Mountains, located like at the border of Tanzania and Kenya in Africa. And these are understory plants, and they're found in like crevices of rocks. And we'll get more into that when we talk about care, because you know that goes into the whole thing about soil and lighting and water, etc., etc. So yeah, so that's just a tiny little background on them. They first came into cultivation, I believe, in like they were made available to the public in like 1927, and today they started out as just simple little single bloom, like when they were first discovered, and all we have is like botanical pictures of them, which I'll put a picture up here. Cute little single bloom African violet, and today they have changed into, they've been cultivated, and there's like over 16,000 different cultivars of African violets. You cannot collect them all, okay? Don't even try. Yeah, there are so many. You just gotta pick a few of what your favorite looks and go with that. So anyway, they've changed. They're not just little single bloom plants anymore. They've changed into like curly little blooms and double bloom flowers, and it's just incredible like how they've been able to create all these different varieties. So anyway, that's just a little bit of information. Did you know African violets are one of the most popular houseplants in the world? You may have never guessed that. If you watch plant YouTube, you would think anthuriums are the most popular plants in the world, or philodendrons, or Hoyas, which all of those are very popular, but in the whole world, outside of just YouTube, PlantTube, African violets are the most popular plants, and for good reason, because look at them. You don't just get beautiful foliage with these guys, you get beautiful blooms, beautiful flowers, and going along with that 16,000 different types of cultivars of African violets, you have a lot to choose from. So now most people probably, when they think of African violets, they think of their grandmother, perhaps. They think of them as granny plants, and well, the older generations, they knew what they were doing. They had good taste. Yeah, I'm hopeful that future generations these will become more popular with future generations. Yeah, like I was raised by boomers, and boomers were raised by the greatest generation, and us older folks know what we're doing. Anyway, just a little fact. They are the most popular houseplants in the world. All right, so one of the things I love most about African violets, and probably what most people who are into African violets love most, is that they flower. I love a flowering plant, and obviously these are flowering plants. Now, it's not just, the flowers are wonderful, but it's also the foliage. Now, you can have several different types, like different shades of green in the foliage, like right here, even these two examples. So this one here is called the Star Race, right? That Star Race, I believe, and then this one is the LE Carousel. So different, such a difference between these two. Now, leaves colors can range from like light green to deep red, and they can be variegated. They can be striped and blotched. I have a blotched one right here. I can show you the blotching. It's different from variegation. It's just kind of has some blotching on the leaves. And they can be speckled or they can be completely solid. And I think this is a beautiful example of a solid green leaf on an African violet. So there is just so much variety. And as far as the blooms, so you can have pansy single, which is basically like the original, the OG, back in 1892 when they found the African violet, when they first discovered the African violet. It was a single bloom, and right here would be a nice example of a single bloom, I think. I think that would be a good example. The best example I have in my collection, this also would be a single bloom. It's just flat, almost kind of has a look of a violet or like a pansy, just kind of flat. And then also they can come in semi-double, which I'm going to have to put up pictures of some of these so you can see like semi-double, what that looks like. And we have double. There's so many. We have double plus, and we have star single. We have double star. There's bell, and then there's wasp. So you can see there are just so many different types of like flower shapes, leaf colors, flower shapes, and of course flower colors. They are not just pink and purple these days. There are so many. So back in the day, back in simpler times for me, my very first African violets, I have a photo of them. Your classic pink and blue or purple, and these are single blooms, single pansy or pansy single. And yeah, those are my originals. I wish I still had them today. And I technically could. Now, African violets can live like 30 to 50 years or something like that. And you can extend that time. I have an heirloom African violet from my mother-in-law that has been around for over 50 years. You can extend that life by propagating your plants, and you can do that by leaf propagation, which we will go into later. But anyway, so yeah, just so many different looks to the African violet, which is another thing that draws me to them. Not just the flowers, the blooms, but just all the different, like just look here, I'm surrounded by so many different looking African violets. All right, so let's get into how to care for African violets. So as I said, they're found in Africa. They're found in the tropics, like the tropical rainforests in Africa. So they do enjoy humidity. Yeah, and we'll talk more about that coming up. But first I want to talk about lighting. So as I said, they are found they're understory plants found in crevices of rocks. They don't get a whole lot of light. So they do best in filtered, like bright filtered light. So like ideally, if you have an east facing window, that is a perfect place for these plants. They're going to get some very gentle morning sun. The light is one of the biggest factors in getting these plants to bloom. So they're going to just be getting that perfect little bit of sunlight in the morning and then bright light throughout the day. And it's just like a really great location to keep your African violets. You don't want them in direct sun except for that gentle morning sunlight, which would be perfectly fine. But midday sun or afternoon sun is just going to be too harsh for these plants. Also, what really works well is artificial light. LED or fluorescent light works great for these guys. I actually don't keep any of my African violets near windows. All of mine are kept under artificial light, under LEDs. Yeah, I think they're all LED lights. And you can see it is working out perfectly fine to give me all these beautiful blooms. An interesting thing I want to point out, there is a fungus gnat. There is a fungus gnat that must live in this plant right here, and it just keeps flying all around. Fungus gnats. That is one challenge with African violets because their soil, we'll get into soil, but the soil stays kind of moist, so it's a perfect little playground for fungus gnats, which can be a challenge. But anyway, what was I talking about? Oh, lighting. So like how intense your lighting is can make a difference in how your plant blooms. And this is firsthand experience. And I'm curious if anyone else out there has had a similar experience. Perfect example right here. So right here, this is called pink curls. Pink curls. It's not very pink, is it? No. So this was a propagation. It was a leaf propagation from my original mother plant, which I don't think I even have my original mother plant anymore. I just have propagations, several different. I have like four propagations of this plant. Actually, there's another one that I just propagated recently over there, so like 5. So this is the same plant. These are the same plant. This one is in much more intense, like brighter artificial light. It's just, I'll include some video here of where this one sits. It's much brighter light than what this plant gets, which normally this plant is sitting right back here behind me, which there are grow lights all around it, but it's not quite as intense as the light I'm getting on this one. So it is much more pale. If you look closely, you might be able to see there is just a hint of pink, but it mostly looks white. I just find that fascinating, very interesting how differently this plant, this species reacts to lighting, like intensity of lighting. So, okay, so let's talk about watering needs of these plants. So you want to keep the soil of these plants moist, but not soggy. Like I have found the best way to keep like the soil and the perfect amount of moisture in the soil is to use self-watering pots. And this is an example of a self-watering pot. In case you're wondering, this plant here is called Kay's Purple Hog. This is one I got started as a leaf cutting from my mother-in-law, and I have made multiple plants out of that one leaf. Like the original, like I had the leaf, propagated the leaf, grew the mother plant, and then this is a mother plant from the original mother plant, which came from the original leaf. I no longer have the original mother plant. I think it root rotted. I'm positive it root rotted. And since that happened, I have been keeping this plant in a self-watering pot like this. And it's just, I think it's the best way to keep it like that perfect amount of moisture in the soil and not root rotting the plant. Now, the composition of your soil is going to make a big difference when using self-watering pots, and we will go into soil composition in a little bit. Another perfectly great way to water your plants is, and this is another way I do it, is just to set your pot with drainage. Your pot has drainage. Set it in a tray, like a big enough tray that you can have like an inch of water sitting in that tray, and you place your plant onto that tray filled with water and allow it to soak up the water for like 30 minutes. And then you can just drain, empty that tray out, and the plant can go back to its happy, merry self back on in its normal spot. That's what I do with this one. Now, in the future, this is something I'm going to do. You don't have to do it because currently I'm not doing it, and it's working out okay. But I just feel like it might be better when I repot this plant, whenever that may be. It probably won't be. This is a 4-inch pot here, not until I move it to a 6-inch pot. When I do that, I'm going to put a string, like a soaking string. I don't know what you call those, but basically, if I can, here, let me grab this one over here to show you what that looks like. It's just one of these strings. See that string? So that string is sitting in the water, and it's also in the potting mix with the plant, and it just kind of distributes the water more evenly, because what I've noticed when I do water something like this, it mostly is just staying wet from like a quarter of the pot down. Like it doesn't get all the way up to the top layers of the pot, which doesn't seem to be harming the plants, but I do think it causes me to have to water more frequently. Like I think I could go longer if possibly between waterings of my plants. Yeah, just a little observation I made. I mean, if you look in the pot, most of the roots are down here where it is getting the most moisture, so it doesn't really seem to be an issue, but I do want to add one of those strings to the pot to help it to soak up that water more evenly through the pot. I think that might make a difference for it. All right, so now overwatering and underwatering can be an issue with African violets, and the best way I have found to avoid it is to use the self-watering pots. It's just like, yeah, and when you get that perfect combination, soil combination used with the self-watering pot, life is so easy. Caring for African violets is just so easy. There's like no guesswork. No guesswork. It's just perfect. Yeah, so be careful with your watering, how much water you give it. It really, really depends on your soil, and we'll go into soil, but the soil composition is going to make a huge difference. Also, when you're watering your plants, you want to avoid getting water on the leaves, especially cold water. Don't get cold tap water. No. That can leave brown spots on your leaves. It's not going to kill your plant, but it's just, you want your plant to look its most beautiful at all times, which is kind of hard. It's, it's not an easy task. Trust me, I know. My plants are by no means perfect. I mean, if you look close, you are going to see issues. If you look from afar, like right here, they look fabulous, but if you get up close and you look, you're going to see little imperfections. We'll talk about those imperfections coming up. But yeah, just try to avoid getting water on the leaves. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, Gina, doesn't it rain in nature? Don't they get wet in nature? Yes. Yes, they do. They do. However, like I said, they are understory plants. They live beneath, they have a lot of protection. So they're not getting like blasted with water. And also, they're getting very pure, beautiful rainwater with probably very little impurities in it, as opposed to tap water, which is probably what most of us are using. It's what I use. I use tap water, which is perfectly fine for your plants, unless you have like really terrible water quality. That can affect your plants, and we'll go into that later. But rainwater, pure, soft water, and it's gonna just flow right off these leaves. And also the lighting intensity where they're located in nature, they're not getting hit with bright sun that's going to cause, ugly brown spots. So typically it's, when you get that tap water on the leaves, and then it's going to leave some spots for you. Now, don't think that plants in nature look perfect. They don't. I'm sure you've seen videos of people going into the wild and looking at these plants in their natural habitat, and they don't look so good. Their leaves are torn. They have plenty of imperfections. However, we growing these plants in our house, we have the ability to control stuff like that from happening. Like, we don't have big gusts of wind coming in and tearing leaves. It's a controlled environment. So if any way you can avoid getting water on these leaves, it can prevent the brown spots that make the plant look ugly. So yes, in nature, just know in nature the plants don't look perfect. They don't. But if you get water on the leaves, it's not going to kill the plant. It's just going to look imperfect. Basically, that's it. If you want to get water on your leaves, get water on your leaves. If you don't care about imperfections, just do it. But if you're a perfectionist and you want your plants to look the best they can look, just try to avoid it. That's basically what it comes down to. Also, when you're watering your plants, you want to use room temperature water. Now, this is important because if you use cold water, it can really hurt the roots of your plant. And yeah, it's not good. That could potentially kill your plant. So go for room temperature water. You can get that by filling up a jug and leaving it out for a while to acclimate to the room temperature before you water your plant. Or you can just adjust it on your faucet. Adjust it so it feels like, it feels like water you'd want to take a bath in. Basically. It's not too hot and it's not too cold. It's just right. So, yeah. I think that's it. I think that's it for water. You can let your soil get dry, like 80% dry every now and then. Like, for instance, well, even that one I was just holding is pretty dry right now. This is pretty dry. It's okay to get pretty dry. And the leaves are still nice and taut and firm, and the plant is not dehydrated. I just watered this plant like 3 days ago, maybe. My soil composition it's a very airy soil, so it dries out pretty quick. So yeah, but it's okay for them to get dry. You'll know when they're not happy when they are too dry and not happy, because these leaves will start to wilt. And then you know. They can also wilt for other reasons. But if your soil is dry, you can see it's dry, you know it's dry, and your plant is wilted, that's because it needs water. So yeah, that should cover all the watering needs of the plant. We'll go into fertilizer later. So yeah. I thought of one more thing as far as watering. So we talked about getting water on the leaves. It's not going to kill your plant. It's not. However, one way you can kill your plant with water is if you get water in the crown of your plant, like this very center of your African violet. That's where the new leaves come out. That's where the flowers come from. It's called the crown. And if you get water in there and it sits in there and it stays in there, you're going to get crown rot. And that's just, I mean, once you rot the center of your plant, it can no longer produce new flowers. It can't produce new leaves. It can't grow. So eventually this plant is going to, it's the death of the plant. So by all means, do everything you can to avoid getting water in that center, the center of that crown, the crown of the plant. All right, so now it is time to talk about temperature and humidity. So in nature, as I said, these guys come from the tropical rainforests in Africa. They're used to high humidity, love humidity. From everything I have read, they say you want to give your plants at least 50% humidity in order for them to bloom. Well, I have an issue with that little guide, humidity guide there, because I do not give my plants 50% humidity. On a good day, it might be 40%. On a typical day, we're looking at 30%. And I have no problems whatsoever getting my plants to bloom. So, you know what? If you see that guideline on the internet, don't think you have to have 50% plus humidity, because I don't, and I have no problem getting my plants to bloom. So, but if you can give them higher humidity, of course they're gonna. All plants, the higher humidity, for the most part, all plants. Maybe not a cactus, but the higher humidity. You know what? Even a cactus, they like humidity. Yeah, all plants. All creatures need water. So, but yeah, if you can give them higher humidity, great. But if you're like me, around 30%, it's going to be great too. So temperature-wise, just normal ambient conditions, like 75 to 85 degrees, I think is their like perfect range. If you get down into like 55 degrees, they can handle it for short periods, but after a while, they're going to decline. You're going to kill your plant. So just, yeah, like in the wintertime, I know some people like to keep their temperatures down, like 60, like some people even go 60 degrees. How do you do that? How? The most we get down to 65 degrees at night in the winter, which is, it doesn't affect me because I'm warm under the covers at night. The plants, they're subjected to that 65 degrees at night, and they do fine. The African violets, no problems, no issues. All the plants in my collection, no issues. But if you're getting down into like the 50s, 55 degrees, eventually you're going to run into some problems. So ideal, 75 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit for these plants. Just to circle back quickly on humidity, if you are trying to increase your humidity, if you don't have a humidifier in your space, you can always set them on a pebble tray. Supposedly that works. I don't know. I have tried that before, and in my experience, it didn't really work. As far as I could tell, it didn't work, but apparently it works. So that's an option. And did you know that the hairs, this is not a good one to show hairs, but the leaves of African violets are very fuzzy and hairy. They're quite hairy. I think this one might be a better one to see the hairs, to actually see the hairs. They have these hairs on the leaves. Did you know that those help the plant to absorb humidity from the air? They use that to absorb humidity from the air. Pretty cool, huh? Bet you didn't know that. I didn't know that. I just learned that. So yeah, pretty neat. Now this one here, in case, I'm trying to remember to like tell you the names of all of these if I know the name. Just in case anyone asks. This one is called Sunny Salmon. It is putting out, it doesn't have all its blooms out. It has been one of my best bloomers of late, but it has lost a lot of the blooms, but it is getting new ones. These are kind of a little bit faded. These are at the point now where I might start removing them, because when you remove faded blooms, or blooms that just don't look fresh, it'll make your plant push out more blooms. So keep that in mind. Basically, it's kind of like deadheading. You're deadheading your African violet. There's more little ones coming out here. Yeah, I probably should just deadhead this one. Should I deadhead it right now? So I'll just snap it right out. Now it's not as pretty, but the energy that was being put into these blooms is now removed, and more energy will be put into new blooms like here, right there. See those hidden? Those are all, in a couple weeks, this is going to be magnificent. Very beautiful, very pretty. All right, so that covers temperature and humidity. Now let's talk about soil and repotting. Gosh, this is going to be a long video. Okay, so what you want is a very light and porous soil. Soggy and heavy is going to kill your African violets so fast. It's going to smother the delicate roots of the African violet. They have super duper delicate roots. You can kind of see them, hopefully, here. They're just very fine and delicate. So you want a very airy, porous soil. So what I do is I go for the commercial prepackaged African violet soil. However, I also add in perlite. So this is especially important if you're doing self-watering pots like this. This is a self-watering pot. Because this self-watering African violets in self-watering pots, they stay wet longer, like all the time. They're moist. So if you have like a really thick, dense soil, it is going to smother those roots. You are going to get root rot, guaranteed, 100%. Trust me, it's going to happen. So if you are doing self-watering pots, you want to take, and I highly recommend just going for the commercial, specially made African violet soil. It has the perfect pH. I think it's supposed to be, I have it written down. pH should be between 5.8 to 6.2. The prepackaged stuff is like perfectly formulated exactly for what African violets need. Use that. Just do it. Just do it. Unless you are like a chemist or something, you're really good at mixing your own soils, like knowing what to do. Do it yourself. It's probably cheaper. However, prepackaged bags of African violet soil are not that expensive at all. Not at all. So, yeah, if you get like too high or too low of the pH, if your pH is not within the proper range, the plant is not going to be able to take up the nutrients. Like nutrients are not going to be able to be absorbed by the plant. So that's very important. So just, do what you want, of course, but I highly recommend buying the prepackaged African violet soil. And then what I do is I do a 50-50. I do 50% African violet soil with 50% perlite mix it together, and it's like the perfect soil for your plant. That is what I do. I don't know what the experts do. I am not an expert. I told you that in the beginning. I'm not an African violet expert. I am a hobbyist, but that is what works for me, and so I'm going to share that with you. It works great for self-watering pots. It also works great for my plants that just bottom water, sit in a tray and bottom water that way. It's perfect. Yeah, that's my soil of choice. So they recommend that you repot your African violets once a year. Do we do that? Does the average hobbyist do that? Probably not. But that is what is recommended. And if you see, like, if your plant is struggling, you can always repot your plant. There might be an issue with the roots. Now, did you know African violets actually love to be snug as a bug in a rug? Snug in their pots. They love it that way. Also, if they're not concentrating growing roots in the pot, they're concentrating on blooming. So if you put an African violet in too big of a pot, you may not get blooms for a while because that plant is going to be working on filling the pot with roots before it's going to start throwing out blooms for you. So the best size, I think the recommended size for African violets would be like a 4-inch. And then you can upgrade to a 6-inch. Probably you wouldn't need to go higher than a 6-inch, as the plant grows. I always start out with like a 3-inch for my propagations. And then I move them to 4-inch. This is 4-inch. This is a 4-inch. I can't easily grab a 3-inch. Actually, these self-watering pots are technically like 3 inches. They're pretty tiny. So this is the reservoir, but I don't know if you can see it, but that is about a 3-inch pot that the soil and the plant is in. Like this one will need to be moved up to a 4-inch, probably fairly soon. However, I don't see any roots. Oh, I do see a couple roots coming out of the bottom. One way to know if you need to repot is when you see roots coming out of the bottom of the pot, and then you know you should upgrade, pot it. But yeah. All right, so let us talk about fertilizer, because I said one of the most important things to get blooms is the lighting that you're giving. If it doesn't have enough light, it's not going to bloom. Another thing, if it doesn't have enough nutrients, it's not going to bloom. So fertilizing, feeding your African violets is very important. Once again, I use a commercial African violet. This is what I use here. Fertilizer. It's a liquid fertilizer, and I just go by the directions on the bottle. I think it's 7, well, I do 2 full squirts of this one. So I think it's like 14 drops per gallon of water. It's quite diluted, very diluted. Now, if you over fertilize your plant, you very likely will kill your plant. So don't do that. Definitely follow the directions and use a fertilizer that is specifically for African violets if you want to be ultra safe. It's just a good recommendation. So now frequency of fertilizing in the growing, there's 2 schools of thought on this. So some say only fertilize during the growing season, and others say you can fertilize year round. I am in the year-round fertilizing camp, but it's quite diluted. It's a diluted fertilizer. The reason I do year-round is because, my conditions in my home are just like summer year-round, basically, really, kind of. So I feel like my African violets bloom year-round. So, and I feel like fertilizing them year-round is what helps them to bloom year-round. So that's what I do. Others only fertilize in the growing season, spring and summer. Either works. It's up to you. What works best for you. All right, so the last thing we are going to talk about is like problems. The problems we face with our African violets. Let's talk about pests, because that is the biggest bummer, the biggest downer for me with African violets is dealing with pests. So the type of pests that these plants are prone to are mealybugs, which thankfully I have not had issues with mealybugs. They can have issues with thrips, which I have. That is my big one with African violets, thrips. They can have issues with fungus gnats, which obviously you saw I mentioned a fungus gnat earlier in this video. Fungus gnats are a challenge with these guys because that soil stays moist. And then another thing, not a pest bug, but you can have issues with something called powdery mildew. And that's because of the moist conditions that these guys are typically or can be exposed to. So yeah, those are the things. So now what can you do if you get mealybugs on your African violets? They're pretty, I mean, you don't want to get any bug. The best solution to pests is prevention. Like don't get to a point where you're going to have to deal with pests. Easier said than done. However, sometimes it's inevitable. It's going to happen. So one thing you can do is just always be paying attention to your plants. Be looking, like I am always looking for thrips on my African violets because they're so prone to them. I specifically deal with flower thrips, which are the teeny tiniest little bugs. You can't even see them. You can see sometimes the larvae on the leaves. Flower thrips are drawn to these guys because of the flowers. So what can you do about flower thrips? Did I tell you what you can do about mealybugs? I mentioned mealybugs. Let me do mealybugs first. So you can use isopropyl rubbing alcohol and just dab them like on a Q-tip. Get some alcohol on a Q-tip and, get each of your little mealybugs that you see. You can do that. Thrips, basically, and I have tried. So I don't like to use pesticides with my plants. And so I typically will use like a DIY pest spray, which is mostly water, but it also has isopropyl alcohol in it, and it has peroxide and a couple different types of Castile soap. I have tried that sprayed on my African violets. So it works. Like you can spray your African violet, but you need to make sure that you rinse the plant. Like you don't leave it on the plant. You rinse it. Make sure you rinse it off. Like spray it, leave it on for like a minute, spray the plant, get all that off. And be careful not to get water in the crown. See, it's very difficult. You can try that. You can try a spray. I don't recommend it just because it's just so difficult. And I worry about getting, crown rot, getting water in the crown and getting crown rot. So this is what I recommend. And this works for mealybugs too. And I know some places can't do this. Some countries don't allow it. But if it is allowed in your country, you can get there's a specific brand. It's called Bonide Systemic Granules. And I'm going to put the name of the main ingredient in that kills the bugs. It is there. You put that every time you repot your plant, put that in the soil. It only lasts like 3 months. So like every, maybe up to 3 months. So you do have to, if you have a continuous like battle with thrips, if you put those granules in the soil, it's going to kill the thrips and also the mealybugs, but it's only going to last like 3 months. So if you don't get all of them, it can get reinfected. Like if there's mealybugs or thrips on other plants in your home, they can eventually come back to the plant you just treated and killed the bugs on, and you're going to have to treat again. Kind of stinks, but that's basically how it works. So the systemic granules work the best for me. Now, where I live, it's very difficult for me to get the systemics now. I used to be able to get them. I can't get them anymore. Well, specifically, I can't get the Bonide brand, but my local plant nursery does sell a different brand with the same active ingredient that kills the bugs. They're able to sell it, and I'm able to get it that way. So that is it. Yeah, put the systemics, if you can, put them in the soil to kill the bugs, to keep them away, at least for 3 months, until you have to treat again. Now, another thing you can do, and I have not done yet, but this is my future plan, I am going to use diatomaceous earth, which is, it's a natural ingredient. You have to use food grade diatomaceous earth. That is very important. I think they also sell it for swimming pools. That's not the same thing. You want food grade diatomaceous earth, and you want to make sure you're in a very well ventilated area. Wear a mask. You don't want to breathe it in. Wear eye protection. You don't want to get it in your eyes. It's like little pieces of glass in this powder. And that is what you sprinkle it. You're going to sprinkle it all over the plants. Get it on the leaves, on the top of the leaves, the underside of the leaves. Get it into the soil. You can put it into the soil. And yeah, that's my next, if in the future, if I have issues, I'm not currently having thrip issues, but that's something I'm going to try, diatomaceous earth. Yeah, and then cleaning it off, I read, you can take like a paintbrush, just a brush, and brush it off of the leaves. Once again, making sure you're wearing face protection, wear a mask, wear glasses, some sort of goggles to protect your eyes. Pretty much, I think it's best to do it outdoors, definitely, because if you have pets, you don't want them. You can't put a face mask and goggles on your cat or your dog. Well, I think they do actually make goggles for animals, but you can't put a face mask on them. So anyway, yeah, pests have been the biggest downer for me with African violets. They kind of, well, with any plant, they just kind of suck the fun out of it. So now, okay, so that's bugs, pest bugs. Let's talk about powdery mildew. All right, so I am going to need to wrap this up soon because I feel like I am losing my voice from talking so much. Plus, I'll probably get complaints if it's too long of a video, a care video. But, okay, powdery mildew. So what it is, it's like a white, is it a bacteria or a fungus? I guess like a fungus. It's just, it'll look all white. Your leaves of your African violets will start to turn white. It can get on the flowers of the plants, and what causes it is very moist, humid conditions where there's no air circulation, and it just forms. Begonias also can run into that problem. A way to prevent it from happening is to make sure you have good air circulation. I have a fan running right now in this room where I keep a lot of African violets, and just have very good air circulation, and don't crowd your plants too close together. I have a bad habit of doing that. Luckily, I haven't had a powdery mildew outbreak from it, but I am trying to make it so that there is more space between my African violets so that air is circulating between them. So let's say you do get powdery mildew. What do you do? I've never had it happen, so I had to look it up because I don't know. So they suggest you can do like a baking soda solution. So that is 1 teaspoon of baking soda with 1 quart of water. Put it in a spray bottle and spray your plant. Spray it all over your plant. Another thing you can do is a milk solution, and that is like 9 parts milk to 1 part water. So I guess, you know, you can mix how much you want. Like if you need a lot, you can do like 9 cups of milk to 1 cup of water. No, scratch that. No, that's not right. It's the opposite. 1 part milk to 9 parts water. So 1 cup of milk to 9 parts water, put it in a spray bottle or whatever, spray the entire plant. Or another option would be to use just a commercial fungicide, I think that's how you pronounce that. That's approved for African violets. So make sure whatever one you pick is approved for African violets. And then immediately after treatment, you want to rinse your plants, rinse off whatever treatment you're using, and then stick a fan on that plant so that it can dry right away. Yeah, you want to get it dry. And also, like for previously when we were talking about pests like bugs, if you use like the DIY spray I talked about and you do spray your plant and then you have to rinse your plant, stick a fan on it. You want to get it dry as quickly as possible. Dry the whole plant off. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about pests. Prevention includes maintaining good air circulation by spacing out plants. This is for powdery mildew. Clean up fallen leaves or debris promptly, and avoid watering leaves directly. Water the soil only. So that's another reason why you want to avoid getting water on the leaves, because it could lead to powdery mildew. So yeah. So we talked about imperfections on these plants. So there are going to be times when you're going to run into, you know, your plants are going to have little imperfections. Like for instance, this one, you see these little brown spots here on the edges of the leaves. This is an older leaf. It could very well be that it's just an older leaf and it's dying off. I have actually a couple like that. Or it could be something else. It could be sometimes when you get like the crispy brown edges, it could be from too much fertilizer, excessive fertilizer. That's a possibility. You know, it could be what's causing it. I've noticed it's more common on my plants that have variegation on the leaves. So maybe it's just like, I don't know. It could be even like chloramines in the water, like in the tap water, like which your cities treat the water with. It could be affecting the plant. This plant, when I first got it, it went through a very rough acclimation to my home. These are older leaves. This could just be part of the acclimation, like leftover acclimation period for this plant. Yeah, I mean, it could be many things, like yellow leaves on an African violet. It could be caused from too much water. It can be caused from not enough water. It can be caused from nutrient deficiencies. Yeah, you're gonna run, trust me, if you get African violets, you're gonna run into these little imperfections. And basically, you just have to kind of figure out, like by looking at your plants, what could possibly be causing it. Now for me, I would love for my plants to be perfect, have no imperfections, but I've come to realize that that's an impossibility. It's just not possible. They're not going to be perfect. As long as the plant is not dying, I'm okay if it has some little brown on it. It's okay. I mean, the rest of the plant, the crown, specifically like on an African violet, the crown looks happy and healthy. The plant is blooming. This, by the way, is Rose Bouquet, in case anyone is curious what this one is. It has little rose-like flower buds on it. Beautiful little plant. Dainty little flowers on this one. But yeah, I've come to learn that my African violets are not being entered into any shows. Like there are competitions like for growing these African violets. I do not have show quality African violets, but they are beautiful, even with their little imperfections, with their little, like, little marks on the leaves. Now on this specific African violet, the variegation is on the outside of the leaves, but there's little imperfections on the inside of the leaves. It's okay. I mean, as long as the plant is not overall declining, it's not dying, it is what it is. That's what I say. So yeah. So hopefully, I'm sorry that I'm ending this like, oops. I'm sorry I kicked the camera. But I'm sorry I'm ending this kind of on a negative note, because there is so much wonderfulness to these plants, so much beauty to these plants. And even with, the negative stuff, the positives of the African violet outweigh the negatives that you deal with these plants. So yeah, I hope some of the things I mentioned in this video don't turn you away from African violets. You need to give it a try. If you like the way they look, if you love the blooms and the foliage, all the different types of foliage, ruffled edges, variegated leaves, if you enjoy that, if you like the look at it, give it a try. And I do recommend going to a big box store if this is your first African violet, your first venture into African violets. Go to the big box store, buy a cheap African violet, get your feet wet that way first, so you learn with a cheap plant, and then you can go to Etsy or wherever your choice of fancy African violets, where to get them. You can pay the higher price. Like even my most expensive African violet was maybe $25. I'm sure they can go higher price than that, but that's kind of the high, which isn't that bad. I mean, considering, we buy some plants in our collections over $100, over $200, $300, $400, $500, $1,000. So anyway, hopefully nothing I said here deters you from trying out African violets. And I wanted to go into like propagation with these plants, but I might save that for another video, just like showing you how to propagate these plants. You can do it by division. Like these guys they get so big and they produce multiple plants in one pot, and you can divide them and propagate that way. Or you can propagate from just a leaf, which is like just a leaf like this, which I made this cut earlier in the day from a plant that I wanted to get a backup for. I always advocate, if you have a African violet you love, make a backup for that plant, because yeah, it's always good to have a backup of your favorite plant, just in case the original goes downhill, which I have had happen. It does happen with African violets, because they can be fussy. They can be a fussy plant. But even so, I still love them to death. Bad choice of words. I do not love them to death, but I do love them a lot. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed learning all about the African violet here today. I hope I covered everything. If I missed something, if you have a question, you can put it in the comments. Hopefully, maybe someone with a lot of experience with African violets, would like to help out in the comments answering questions. I welcome that. And yeah, if you have any further discussion, if you guys want any more discussion about African violets, go to the comments. Yeah, they're a wonderful genus. I adore them, and they bring me tons of joy, so much joy. So thanks you guys for joining me here today. I hope you learned something. Hope you had fun. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.